Welcome to my webinar. My name is Francesca Ronchi and I'm a senior scientist at the University of Bern. And we are studying the role of the microbiota. So all the microbes that are living together with us, what do they do on the host? So on the mammalian host, on the human beings, and in particular, we are interested in understanding how they impact on the neural development, on development of the central nervous system. So I'm grateful to the BINC, Biostem Institute of Nutrition and Care of Geneva, to support us and support this project. So to start with, I will just give you an introduction on what is the microbiota. So the microbiota is a pool of bacteria, virus, fungi that they live all over our mucosal surface. This means that they live on our skin, in the mouth, in the gastrointestinal tract, in the female genital tract. And they're very important for our health. And how do we encounter those microbes? We encounter at the time of the delivery, so at the time of birth. So mammals and humans are developing in uterus in a sterile environment. And at the time of birth, they get exposed to the environment, to the microbes also. And there are several postnatal and natal factors that they can impact on the development of these microbes in the early phase of life. And this is a very important period of time, which in humans is up to 2 to 3 years, where the microbiota changes a lot. And it can be actually impacted by many factors with a long-term effect. So the postnatal factors that are very important is the feeding, family members, geographical location, interaction with other people or other animals also, the maternal diet, and the time when the baby gets exposed to solid food. So why it's so important to understand how the microbiota develops together with the human system, with the human organs, it's because it stays at the base of lots of diseases. So alteration in the microbiota and in the function of the intestine have been linked to many different diseases, as we know from the time of old ancient Greek doctors. And in fact, the importance of the microbiota resides in the fact that they do lots of beneficial things to our health. They produce vitamins, which are crucial for our development, especially also for the central nervous system, like folate. They teach the immune system to discriminate what is a pathogen that we need to fight against, and we need to get rid of that because it can cause disease, and what is actually a friend, a beneficial bacteria that protects from us. They produce important molecules that they can travel all around the body and actually signal in different organs. They defend against infections. They also influence how much calories we can take up from our food, and they produce hormones like serotonin that is important for the gut function. So therefore, as you can imagine, if you have alteration in the composition or in the function of the bacteria that reside in our body, then there will be also dysfunction on all these aspects. And this is important because in the last years, we noticed that the incidence in different immune diseases affecting different organs like the central nervous system, such as multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease affecting the gastrointestinal system, type 1 diabetes, impacting in the pancreas, or asthma in the lungs, were dramatically increasing. And this cannot be due only to modification of our genome, because this will take 2 much time to really see an effect if this would happen, but this is related to our environment. And what happened to our environment during the time is that we are changing our lifestyle. So small kids were used to play outside in the nature, touching the nature, touching the ground, getting exposed to microbes there of the environment. Whereas nowadays we are more industrialized, there's more technology, and they play more, they spend more time also inside in a clean environment. Also the way where we live changes. So before we were living in the countryside, now we move all to the cities where of course hygiene conditions are much higher. We in fact have huge consumption of disinfectant. Also our diet changes. Before people were culturing their own food in their garden, they were collecting it and eating directly, whereas now we eat much more processed food. And the usage of antibiotics, of course, in the last year was dramatically increased, and this changes, of course, our microbes. And this is what happens. It happens exactly like we do on our environment, in our nature. We are reducing the biodiversity of our intestinal microbiota, or in general of the microbiota that lives on our mucosal surfaces. So this is a condition, so-called dysbiosis, which means we are reducing the diversity of the microbes that live together with us, and this could lead to the to less protection from infection and less production of good product from the bacteria. This is a picture I always like to show because it represents nicely what is happening. So at the base of these trees, there are factors linked to our lifestyles, the hygienes, the drugs, pollution, diet, and these are the cause of the so-called dysbiosis, so alteration in the composition of the microbiota, reduction in the biodiversity, which are linked to the leaky gut syndrome, which is a word grouping several diseases affecting the gastrointestinal tract. And these are actually always present, this condition is always present in concomitants of many other different disorders affecting distal organs like neurological disorders, autoimmune diseases, allergies, and so on. So it's very important to understand what is happening at this level and how we can intervene and manipulate our microbiota to restore it to a healthy condition. So how the microbiota mediates health? This is a complex way, and it interacts also with the genetic of the individuals and with environmental factors. And we are actually now studying how all these three players can cause chronic inflammatory disorders. And one example that it's very representative is the example of autism in the United States. People affected by these diseases are around 1 in 59 people. So it's a very high incidence, and it increased dramatically in the last few years. And this has been shown to be linked to alteration in the intestinal microbiota. But how the two systems can be connected and can talk to each other, influence them each other. So the gut and the brain, how this is happening. So one of the major hypotheses that it's happening actually through the intestinal microbiota that produce factors, as I mentioned to you before, that can travel around the body, reach the central nervous system, and have an impact there. And this is actually the main hypothesis where we are working on. So in healthy conditions, we have healthy gut function and healthy central nervous system function. And here there's a normal microbiota which produce certain factors which don't induce inflammation, but actually they mediate normal cognition, emotion, and behavior. Whereas if we have alteration in the composition of the microbiota, a so-called intestinal dysbiosis again, it's linked to abnormal gut function, higher level of inflammatory cells and mediators, and which can travel to the central nervous system and affect the functions of these organs as well. So we're actually studying what is happening in this communication system. And one way how we could do that and how we could restore actual normal function is to restore a normal microbiota, which can happen in few different ways, with the prebiotics, so with the diet that promotes the proliferation and expansion of the good bacteria, or providing the good bacteria in a form of probiotic, or restoring the normal microbiota through fecal microbiota transplantation, which is a really good tool nowadays in medicine to treat certain diseases. We don't know yet how exactly all these three approaches will work, and this is why research is moving on that. So with this, I'm concluding my talk, and I thank you for your attention, and thank you.